Dear Hope Church, there's no better name for a church than Hope today. All of us, I know every single one of you has read immensely over the past. It's been on the news. It's been on the TV. It's been online. It's everywhere. You guys have seen the numbers of the COVID go up. You've seen the graphs. I know you have. I have, because I work at Providence Everett Hospital, to where they had the first COVID patient. They treated the first patient very nicely with social distancing at maximum, all right? This was not like 6 feet with a bit of, a mask and a bit of goggles. And no. If you read the description, the patient was put like in a special place, and everything was just like from a distance, and it was a lot of panic then. There's been a lot of hysteria and panic on this whole COVID thing. I've been part of that fear when I'm working there. I'm like three levels away from that ICU. I'm close. I'm really, really close. But that's not the only thing that's been for all of us. You've seen the other side have many times ignorance and arrogance. This is nothing, we were told. This is just a flu. When 100,000 people died from it, it's more than just the flu. When it's this contagious, when it went from 0 to I don't know how many millions in 6 months, it's more than just that. Should we panic? Should we stay in our homes? And should we close our blinds and stay home? No, that's not the answer. Should we absolutely get in the streets and do everything is fine and perfect? I would say no. That's what I think we miss many times when we talk about Proverbs. When God gives you wisdom in Proverbs, it doesn't make you jump on the extremes to where nothing matters or everything is panic. Like the Bible says, the lazy person many times says, there's a lion in the streets. I can't go to work. I can't do anything. The world is falling apart. That's one side. The other side is, hey, just do it. It's fine. It's nothing. I call for you for wisdom. I want to call you to really understand that this is a disease. This is something dreadful where people have died. My cousin, more Pentecostal than I am, is in England right now. She's an anesthesiologist like I am. She's got full garb. She works with these people. She's had people die under her own care. People like my age and your age. So it's not nothing, but it's not the end of the world as we know it either. So in these times of troubles, the question that I always had is, how should we behave? And the text that I've picked and the subject that the pastor picked for you and I today is awesome. It's about fear. How much fear, if any, we should have, and really, of who should we have? And let's listen to Isaiah 41, and initially I was going to say just one verse, but I had to do 2 verses. And Isaiah 41, part of verse 9 and then 10. You are my servant. I have chosen you, and I have not rejected you. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. It's not nothing. Because this text is not written in some sort of just a time and we just read something. Actually, this was written when Israel was in captivity. This is when he talks to them. He comforts them. Isaiah 40 starts with, comfort my people. Tell my people that American language, it's going to be okay. And here says, do not fear, for I am with you. Oh yeah. We live in what I call interesting, unprecedented, like never before. I've been on this earth for 40 plus years, and I don't remember a year that is like 2020. Maybe a few of you guys have lived through impeachment of Nixon. We started with some impeachment talk. Then we had some sort of like global epidemic. Then the depression or recession or whatever you want to call it, when millions have lost their jobs. And even now there's social unrest, and actually it's like in downtown was last night and the night before, and it's been going on for days. It's social unrest. Whatever you're going to stand on the issues. You know, the way I stand is last Saturday not this Saturday, the Saturday before, at 5:03, I got a text because I was in downtown. Not protesting, I was helping with the surgery. You need to get out of town. It's been those times to where, to you and I, this year has been incredibly stressful. And we many times are given into fear. And for at least me personally, I've had the most stressful times have been when my career has changed. When I got into medical school, the first night I could not sleep. Excitement, fear. Everything was fine, it was boring. No issues. I remember when at Los Angeles County Hospital, I received my first page from a nurse. And I'm like, I gotta go answer the page. And I'm holding this pager like it's a dynamite in my hand. I'm imagining you that on the other hand is gonna be somebody that says, Dr. Rad, the patient has coded, or the patient can't breathe, or the patient blood pressure is like 20/10, or something, heart rate is like 2,000. Does not exist. 200. Bit of Trumpism there. That's what I imagined to be. It wasn't. I still remember that during those days I was, believe it or not, a huge stutterer. When I answered the page, I'm like, this is Dr. Rad, can I help you? They're like, what are you talking about? This is Dr. Rad, can I help you? This is, okay, they finally got it after about 3 times. Nobody died, thank God, that day. It's been stressful for me, and I had that fear, and I still remember the fear when I started my anesthesia, to where it's like the night before, I'm not sure how it is for you guys when you start your work, but the night before, I'm just like up, sleeping only a couple of hours. And the same kind of a stress, at least fear for me, was when I figured out that we were for a while the #1 center in US that had most COVID patients. I've watched the numbers. And we were for a while like the epicenter here. Thank God the curve has slowed down, things have gotten better. I think that some of the social distancing, I'm not sure what's happening lately, but at least for a while, it's been actually making a huge difference and people have gotten better. And what concerns me and what concerns us during this time, and it should concern us, and I can't preach about Romans 13 one of these days I will, it's that really people have failed you. People have failed you. The state has failed you. They were supposed to protect you against these things, and they have not. They've told you lies for too long. Do not take up arms because I said so. That's not what the Bible calls it in Romans 13. It calls it submission. But really, you've been failed too many times. And, the failure of these people really tells us one important thing. As it says in Psalms, do not trust in princes. Do not put your trust in Trump. Not in Pence. Not in Ainsley. Not in any of these people. Not in Fauci. Really, our trust is in who? In God. Amen. This is when you can walk fearlessly with wisdom, not making things worse. When you trust in God. Not in people, Not in necessarily everything that Fox News says you have to do. Not everything that CNN does or CNBC does, you have to follow. Because these people will fail you. Fox has called it a nothing for way too long, only to change their tune in a couple of days. CNN has been on fire for all that time. Sorry for the political commentary. But it's been like that. It's been months to where we're supposed to live on some sort of fear that this is going to end the world as we know it. And now, we've been failed by the epidemiologists that said, you know what, it's okay to go downtown and protest. We've been failed because it's a quintessential matter of the African Americans, blacks, whatever you call them, Black Lives Matter. What I've realized that for us, the church, it is a life, a quintessential, an eternity depends on this. No, God doesn't save by works. We talked about it before. But really, coming together as a body, it is part of what we're supposed to do. And the economics have been really bad, and people have been depressed. It will come out like 10, 20 years from now. The rate of suicide is higher, depression, anxiety, drinking, abuse, drugs. When you don't know who to trust. When you trust in princes, when you trust in doctors, when you trust in some leaders that will always tell you the truth and they will guide you. Remember, they will fail you. God will not. Yes. And this is what I want to talk to you about fear. And there's about 600 times in the Bible where it says, do not fear. Abraham says, God tells him, do not fear. Jacob, he's about to meet his brother, do not fear. Moses, don't fear the Pharaoh. Joshua taking on a new leadership. He's like second, it's like Moses was great. Moses brought the whole people out of Canaan, out of Egypt. He's all in the desert, and Moses was great. Now falls all on this guy that is like second. It's never fun to be second. And God says, do not fear. You see when God told them, David, do not fear. Solomon, do not fear. And we hear Jesus say, do not fear in the storm. Do not fear. And even in Timothy, you know what I'm going to say next. 2 Timothy, God did not give us a spirit of fear. There's no fear in love. So, what's fear? And we all know it's an unpleasant emotion that causes us to believe that someone or something is dangerous, and maybe it's going to cause us pain. Your heart rate goes up with fear. You breathe faster. You have increased flow to the lungs, heart, and the brain, and your hands feel really cold, and you sweat. And what happens, when you get fearful and you have adrenaline up high, you just kind of see one thing and one thing only. Haven't you heard of COVID of the past 2 or 3 months? It is even mentally that's the only thing that you can focus on. There are destructive ways of fear. And actually, that's what I want to focus a little bit on, some of the destructive ways. Many of us fear when you hear this COVID started that maybe I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my business. Maybe if you're in school, you haven't done well on your test, on one of the tests, I'm going to fail this class. I can't do my dream job. Some people have feared so much they have stopped going shopping, and everybody's online just buying things. God forbid I'm going to go shopping to Safeway because I'm going to get COVID and die. Some said, God forbid I'm going to go to my doctors because they all have COVID, I'm going to die. No, we don't. And some of you are staying in pain and refusing to get taken care of some of those things. Maybe having your knee, your hip, something replaced because your fear of the COVID. That is false data, fear based on the false data. You'll do okay. You're as likely to get it in a community doing things as much as getting it in an operating room. And one of my favorite things, which I don't have time to talk about it today, and I don't want to bore you with it, is phobias. Like irrational fears of something. Irrational fears of water, irrational fears of people, of talking. There's like irrational fears of the germs to where somebody washes themselves until their hands become raw. That is like irrational, and this is beyond the scope of really my biblical practice. This is not what I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to cure you and lay hands on you and say it's going to be gone. I'm talking about the fact that there's so much destructive fear. And before I just give it a really bad name and I just focus on just what's destructive, really we know full well that there's actually constructive parts of fear. If you're in danger, if it's like midnight and you're in a parking lot and somebody looks at you funny and you're like a gal and you're just like at Waju or other places or UW, there's fear that drives you to do something. Most of you guys do not do well on next to a cliff, which is good. You know, you've been at many places like Yosemite Park or Grand Canyon. Most of us, you know, if this was a cliff, I would not be standing like this. At least I won't. Which is good. God put in us some sort of fear and understanding of danger. You know, the Bible says the fool just goes head in danger, just kind of heads into it. So there is constructive fear. And Matthew 10:28, Matthew records, "Do not be afraid of those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather be afraid of the one with capital O who can destroy the soul and body in hell." The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Paul Tripp said that fear is one of God's gifts to us, and he called it 3 types: the fear of God, rapid response fear, and an appropriate concern. So now that I pretty much looked at the fear itself, I want to approach the text, because we need today not to fear. And if you want to go home with one simple thing, one phrase, do not fear. Some fear COVID, some fear the police, some fear the future, some fear the failing state, the criminals, the FBI. I heard people fear Bill Gates. I was like, it's kind of benign. You might or might not agree with his politics, but it's kind of a benign person. Some make it some sort of antichrist. Some would go after Bezos, specifically Trump. Mark Zuckerberg. You pick your poison of the people that you might fear that's going to do something bad for they won't. Really, when we fear, we have the wrong view of what's going on around us. Because the one that we should really fear is the one that is greater than everything that you see. You become paralyzed by fear when you really lose perspective of God. Once you start understanding that God is greater, God is better, God is more sovereign. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, God knew about COVID. You and I did not know. 1,000 years, God knew COVID is going to be here today. We had some inkling, there's some virus things that we just can't control. There was MERS, there's SARS, maybe some inkling. God knew it. He's above it. He's beyond it. And He is in control. So how do I believe this whole idea of free will and sovereignty? God paints the big picture. You and I get some of the small details. God has it all in control. God has it to where He's known about it. Didn't take Him by surprise. The FBI doesn't take Him by surprise. Trump, Ainsley, nobody takes God by surprise. He knows He's above it all. I know there's an election in November. God does not have elections. That's why I love the Bible talks about God as being king, because king does not submit one more time for another election. It's not every 4 years. It's not every 6. It's not for a lifetime. as the judges are. He's forever. He was here before you were. He's here now that you are, and he'll be here after you leave. This is God. This is the God that is greater than COVID. This is God that is greater than Black Lives Matter. This is God that is greater than the police. This is God that is greater than FBI. This is God that is greater than your problem. This is the God that we should fear. Because he tells us, don't fear anything and anybody else. So, why should we not fear according to the text? Because I have chosen you. I was going to get to it, of course. Jeremiah 1:4, I have consecrated you before you were born. Ephesians 1:4, we're predestined before the beginning of time. God has chosen you, you a servant, you who's not perfect, neither am I. God has chosen you. You really haven't chosen him first. He's chosen you first. He said, you know what, Dan? You know what, Joseph? I'm going to set my love on you and me. We don't deserve it. That's what grace comes about. This is why cross is so great, because none of it would deserve it. It says, I have chosen you. And I haven't chosen you just to be a good friend. I've chosen you my servant. I've chosen you to serve. No, we're not saved by works. But really, if you're saved, you need to do works. Yes. God doesn't just save you to make you just better, to check the box before you go in eternity. God chooses you and I to become his servants. When you understand that part, then you can be bold. You can go to work, put a mask on, wash your hands. It's good to wash your hands. I mean, I find it disgusting that people don't wash their hands after they go to the bathroom. I mean, it's been the eternal joke to where this lights on, like maybe you've seen The Far Side, some of you guys maybe, hasn't washed his hands. Maybe you should have in our bathroom to where you should wash your hands. It's nothing unholy. There's nothing evil in washing your hands. Really, it's not. It's actually good. And it's just like, they had all the cleaning of, you see the Old Testament where they washed and washed and washed and washed and washed. Read your Leviticus. There were a lot of washing in Leviticus. So people say, hey, it's nothing. I'm not even going to wash my hands. It's not. It is. It is. And it's not, nobody's asking you for something sinful. Do it. And then serve. Then go be the hands and feet of Jesus out there. Then you can be bold. You can go to work and you say, you know what? God protects me. I will take the precautions that I do, because none of you guys drive with eyes closed, right? Anybody says, close your eyes and I'm just going to drive the car because it's fine. No. You do the responsible thing. And you do it, and you go to work, and you do your job. Don't say like, the lazy person says, oh, there's a line in the street. There's disease out there and I can't go. No, go to work. You're called to serve, and you need to fulfill that calling. The second thing where it says, why should I not fear? Because God is with you. It says, I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. Matthew 28:20. We know all the Great Commission. The last part we seem to forget. Surely I'm with you always until the end of the age. God chooses you to be a servant. You serve because you know that God is with you. God doesn't get bored. America has its own, I have free will. We have a divorce rate of, 20, 30, 40%, 50%. God doesn't do that. There's no reason for you, as it says it here, do not be dismayed. The idea is that you look around. Have you seen this? It's pretty bad. What am I going to do? No. There's no need for us to do that, because God is with us. And one of the texts that I love a lot, it's Judges 6:12. Lord, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. In the middle of the night, this guy's threshing this grain and is kind of afraid, and it's just like, running away from the Midianites. And God says, God is with you. Mighty warrior. It wasn't just like, oh, God is with you, you'll do okay. God is with you, mighty warrior. God is with you. What does a mighty warrior does? Fight. What does a servant do? Serves. God is not with us just to keep us company. That's how we can be not fearful, because God is with us. And it says, this God that has chosen us, this God who is with us, he says, I'm going to intervene for you. Yes, God is sovereign. Everything is under his control. But he says, I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my hand. Yes. God is not a God that stands far off and is like, you know what, pardon me, but he's checking the new stats on COVID and I'm wondering how the earth is doing nowadays. That's what we're told by many people. Just God made the world and let it go on. God doesn't check the news. God makes the news. God is involved, and I don't understand everything, and the problem of evil is quintessential and forever. But really, a lot of the things are being held at bay. What do I mean? Is that I can tell you of worse things that could have happened with COVID. That I believe God intervened and stopped. Sovereign through a sovereign way. It wasn't like the miracle that I could see with my eyes, how actually things have stopped, but God's hand have stopped this evil from going and wiping the whole world. It could have easily wiped the whole world off. And God would not be at fault for anything, because some of it we have been part of the problem. We have not washed our hands. We have traveled all over the world. We've done some of these things to ourselves. But God has restrained that evil. God has made it so we can meet in church today. God has made it so the curve came down. God has made it so we are not being wiped out. So none of you, at least that I see here, are intensive care unit or coughing your lungs up. That's what I call a sovereign God. We would so much like it, and I love it if God could heal, God could help. But really, how many times has God protected you? And at least you know. And for every time you know, there's a bazillion times you just don't know. I have walked past ICU beds that had COVID. And I'm like, only later I'm like, oh, there's too many pumps. There's disease there. I mean, I'm like, and there's some of the science says that there's disease up to like 10 feet, especially for these sick patients. God be praised. Until today, I've had 0 symptoms. And I still take care of patients, and some have it. God has protected me, and God will protect you. Do I guarantee that none of you will have COVID? No. But I guarantee that God loves you, and God will get you even through COVID if you need to go through? Yes, He will. God will intervene. God will help you. God will uphold you with His hand. Amen. Again, the government has at least once or twice failed you. God will not. God won't change His mind. God won't change, you know what, I was wrong last week, I'm going to get better this week. No, God is the same. And He gives us strength. He gives us help. And He upholds us. I don't understand all the upholding, but it's really, when we go through troubles, and you look back, like I did when I went to Grand Canyon with 5 kids that were younger than I was 18. And a couple of idiots, me, somebody else, decided to try to go on the steepest hill at Grand Canyon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. With no water. No brains, by the way. And God provided, I don't know, angels? I don't know if it's angels. Maybe it was angels, because in the Bible sometimes people look like angels like people, that helped then my friend, now my wife, come up from like about a third of the way up to walk up the steepest path. I can't remember what the steepest path is, but we walked up to where they had food with them and they had water, and they gave us the lozenges, and they themselves were eating the toothpaste. And we made it to the top. I've come home and I've realized the hand of God has protected me in the dumb, stupid thing I have done. And if you're old enough, you've done some of those things. And it's not luck. Luck does not exist. There's no coincidence. It is God's hands at work in your life to where He's protected you, He's helped you, He's strengthened you. He sent people in your life. In my case, sent people in Grand Canyon at like 7 o'clock at night to come with us. Otherwise, I think I would have been a statistic of kids who decide to go down and never make it up to the top. So how do you overcome destructive fear? I've stolen some of these ideas from one of the bloggers and I've adapted them. But remember that God chose you. Right? This is a text. For I have chosen you, my servant. This is when there's confusion, when there's disease, there's death. Remember, God chose you. He's in control. You're His. And over everything and everyone, God is in control. Do not fear, because God promised never to leave you. God won't dump you for somebody better, because we're all the same. God won't look for somebody else. God will say, I have loved you and I will never leave you. Remember that God is not surprised. Remember that God is not surprised by your circumstances. As in Jeremiah 29 says, I know your future. Remember that God, as it says Romans 8:28, makes everything work for good. One good from COVID, people wash their hands. Thank God. God will make a lot of these things work for good. Even when things to us look like horrible. Even on this part of eternity, like my grandpa died and leaving like 9 kids without a father, some of those things ultimately worked out for good. And have your own Ebenezer. Yes. Remember, keep at least a couple of times, remember when. Most of you guys are immigrants. Remember when God worked so you came to America. I came in 1990s. There was no hope. 91, excuse me. There was no hope I was going to come to the U.S. At that time, there was no hope when they interviewed us. Bush Sr. decided to give new visas and decided, you know what? We're going to have another interview for everybody else who applied before the revolution. We got the visa. That is my Ebenezer. That might be your Ebenezer to when it was the end of the rope and in the last minute, God showed up. God worked for you and God worked for me. This is what we need to remember, as some of you have lost your jobs. Remember what God has done for you and do apply for more jobs. Go do your part as a person, as a Christian who is called to be a servant. And remember that God will work for you, He will work for me. And God is bigger. Remember that God is bigger than anything that you fear. Or even bigger than COVID itself. It's a small little virus that you can barely see or you can't see at all. God is bigger than that. God is bigger than you. God is bigger than any other president. And maybe the last one we need to remember is we need to remember God's love for us. And of course, we're Christians, we remember God's love for us, that Christ died for us. But in Isaiah says, I have engraved you on my palms. Isaiah 49:16. God doesn't really have hands, doesn't really have palms. I don't know how, but God has tattooed your name and mine on His palm. So when He works, He sees who you are. I don't know how well you know your hands. I think you know them very well. Most of you guys do work with your hands. You know, like you have a splinter, you take it off. You know, you see some infection, you take it off. You wash your hands when they're dirty before you eat. That's how God wants to understand that. God has you and I engraved, written on your hands. There's a Christy, there's a Crini, there's names, so to speak. Yeah, metaphorically speaking, God doesn't have really a body, but really, in some ways that we can understand and think. When God works, He has you and I engraved on His hands. That's how when He chose you, that's why He did. And your hands and my hands need to be kind of following His hands in the work to be a servant. But that's how great our God is. That's how great His love is for us. That's when we do not need to fear. Right? That's the reason I went through all these things, and I want you to go home with just this idea. Do not fear. Do not be paralyzed. Don't be frightened. Do not fear, for God is with you. Amen.